What's up, lore masters? While what I do may seem random, I do always try to have some rhyme or reason to the videos that I produce. I bring theme and lore together to entertain, and sometimes to be useful in one's day if I can. I don't think I've ever seen a time more appropriate to discuss the themes of TNG's episode The Drumhead than now. Also, I'm going to be looking at this from a meta standpoint and overall. If you guys want me to get deeper, definitely let me know in the comments. With that out of the way, let's just get into it. A very dangerous part of paranoia, of persecution, indeed a mob mentality itself, is that the most effective use of discrimination is when there is the smallest kernel of truth in what you're saying. Regardless of what you believe, whatever you have faith in, someone but only need justify that belief to the smallest degree with the most flimsiest of truthful information, and they are halfway to convincing you that you not only must persecute those who don't believe what you do, but you must also attack those who would say you are wrong for doing it. The Drumhead, in my opinion, is really a character examination of three different characters. Picard, the initial suspicious observer who wants to find the criminal but finally recognizes when the legitimate suspicion becomes a witch hunt. Worf, who ultimately wants to protect what he feels is important and is blinded by a toxic element that uses his goodwill against him. And then, of course, Satie, a person who believes that anyone that hides something is guilty. That believes anyone who doesn't go along with her 100% in her ideals, in her methods, is against her, and she wants the world fashioned in what she thinks it should be. Ironically, I don't think any of these characters at their core are bad people. I think they want what's best for the Federation and believe that they are doing what needs to be done to preserve their society. So let's break that down. The episode begins with the Enterprise crew investigating a possible spy. A person from the Klingon Empire has recently been on the Enterprise, and it was determined that the Romulan Star Empire was able to garner information that could only be obtained from the Enterprise itself, or, well, it's most likely comes from there anyway. It's really interesting to watch the tools that the Enterprise crew utilize at the beginning. The investigation involves the use of Troy and her telepathic abilities, along with Riker asking questions. The Klingon is closely monitored after the breach and confined to his quarters. The tools being used against him seem completely legitimate for the crime that he is suspected of. Everything at this point is reasonable. It's worth noting, though, this man is still technically innocent. He has not been found guilty in a court of law. However, the crew, especially Worf, treat him as if he's already guilty, as if he's already been found that way from a court. Of course, the Klingon is not a part of the Federation, nor is he a part of the crew, but it's curious how people treat him versus the rights that will be fought for at a later point of Tarsus. At the same time all of this is happening, a part of the warp drive explodes. Investigations into the accident determine initially that there's no reason for this to be an accident, that it could not have occurred without outside help. It appears to be sabotage and of course appears to be linked to the suspected spy. Information has already been passed to the Romulan Star Empire, and now the flagship has been sabotaged. This really seems up the alley of something the Romulan Star Empire would do. Though it does make me wonder, the Enterprise D is crippled, and they believe the Romulans have done this for some reason. Why aren't there more vessels there for support and protection? This would be a prime time to attack and destroy the Enterprise. I mean, in response to this, we only see an Oberth and Excelsior, and that's to transport a former admiral and current head of security. The Enterprise D is a sitting duck. It seems like Starfleet did not take it as seriously as the episode wants us to believe. But anyway, with the possibility of a larger Romulan conspiracy, former Admiral Satie arrives in an Oberth-class ship. Fitting. She begins immediate investigations into the Klingon spy and the engine malfunction. Worf is ultimately able to determine how the Klingon spy was able to hide the information he obtained and get it off ship. Satie takes an immediate shine to Worf after this discovery. She aligns herself with him quite easily. At this point, we see how Worf is taken in by her bravado, her passion, and her cause. After all, she's wanting to ensure the safety of the Federation and the prosecution of anyone that would do it harm. How can you not get behind that? Again, the suspect is proven to be guilty at this point, and how he got the information off the Enterprise is determined. So Worf wanting to push with her and continue down this rabbit hole makes sense. But I want to pause for a minute. After we've determined who the Klingon spy is and how he got the information off, it leaves the engine explosion still unexplained. However, I don't think what we see happens with Picard, Worf, and Satie here can be understated. If we remove the Klingon spy, the thought of a possible sabotage would be a plausible explanation and in the top 5 reasons true, but I doubt that Picard nor Worf would be so apt to focus on that as the only option, if not for the spy. At this point, Satie is able to manipulate both Picard and Worf and keep them singularly focused on what is a possible explanation, but one far from proven. It's interesting how Satie uses an event to keep people looking at something in the way she wants them looking at it. If the road to hell is paved with good intentions, I believe this is where the first brick will be laid for this episode. Right here. During the investigation of the suspected spy, a young man by the name of Tarsus was extremely scared, and it was determined that he was lying about something. When we look to how Picard reacts to this information, he is resistant to further investigation. He doesn't want to push too hard into Tarsus. Tarsus hasn't committed a crime that they know of after all, and he does have rights. We don't see the whole story, but Picard and Riker seemed far less concerned about the rights of the Klingon. Now, it's possible that they were observing them, but to be fair, the Klingon also wasn't a Federation citizen, and it was a legitimate inquiry. But still, Picard was alright with the tools that were used against someone not in his in-group. That could be me looking a bit too much into it, but I still wanted to put it out there for you guys to consider. When we look at Worf and Satie, they've both moved to a stance that Tarsus must have his innocence proven, not his guilt. He's no longer innocent till proven guilty to them. For Satie, it's always been like this, but Worf slowly has moved into her camp. Without even realizing it, they were now going after a young man, even though their inquiry was questionable at best. Now, it is possible to argue that investigating why the man is nervous and what he's lying about is legitimate. It was determined that he was lying during a legal proceeding, and it's still a possibility that there's a saboteur on board. That's sketchy, but still fair enough. However, my point is the intent behind their actions. They wanted to find him innocent to prove he's not guilty, not the other way around. They were after him, not the truth. And again, we continue one brick right after the other. Where we go from morally questionable to outright wrong occurs when Geordi and Data determine that the warp core incident was an accident. It wasn't sabotage. However, even with this information, Satie and indeed even Worf want to move forward going after Tarsus. There's now no crime that needs to be investigated. But the damning thing is, the really scary thing, it's not completely unreasonable. Sure, Tarsus didn't sabotage the Enterprise, but the man is lying. He is hiding some secret. What could he possibly be hiding that is so disturbing to him? If he is a spy for the Romulan Star Empire, then he could do an insurmountable amount of damage to Starfleet and the Federation. And if he isn't a defector, then what he's hiding doesn't really matter. It's really easy to go along with this line of thought when you wrap yourself in the flag and protection of innocent lives. And then another brick. Satie opens the hearings up to the public. After all, we wouldn't want rumors to spread, and if he's innocent, why would he care? There's nothing that brings justice like a mob, all watching the guilty having to prove their innocence. As we know, it's always worked really well for the Cardassians. But the hits keep on coming as Satie's cohorts lie to Tarsus, leading him to believe that the chemicals he had access to were used to sabotage the Enterprise. What is meant to be an investigation was now more an inquisition, an attack on Tarsus. Anything was valid, all to find out is sin. You see, it's okay if Satie and her cohorts lie. They're the good guys, and so they push him, and ultimately, we find that Tarsus has sinned. He's fell short of the glory of God. He lied on his application and had Romulan blood in him. Now, something that I feel gets glossed over, and I don't think that should be understated. Tarsus did do something wrong. He broke the law. Whether this is something that should be a law isn't necessarily relevant in the discussion. Tarsus was a criminal to a degree, and this investigation discovered him. But at what cost? He was considered guilty and not innocent before the truth was discovered, the mob mentality had been put into full effect, his life was being pillaged, and while all of this may have still been legal, it certainly wasn't following the spirit of the law. So was it worth it? Here's a bonus question. Would it have been worth it if this man had been an actual spy? Now, for my money, no. I don't think a society that is willing to persecute 100 innocent men to find one guilty man has ever prospered. But the funny thing is, it wouldn't stop with Tarsus. We plainly see that Worf was happy to do the bidding of Satie now. It is not enough to simply determine the man's secret. His affiliations are important as well. We see them scouring his past and even looking into his brother. No, Tarsus is guilty, and so everyone around him must be searched, especially his family. There is no guiltier man than one who associates with those who are guilty. And when Picard comes to his senses, he finally stands against this. The final brick to hell is laid, in my opinion. Picard is put on trial. I mean, why would you disagree with someone wanting to protect the Federation? Why would you associate with a known liar? Someone who shares the blood of a Romulan? Guilt by association, thought crime, all warranted in this day and age. Only a Nazi would defend the legitimate rights of a guilty person. Only a Romulan sympathizer would think that a guilty man deserves rights and should have the legal protections as everyone else. After all, you aren't free from the consequences of your thoughts. And if you believe wrongthink, if you do something horrendous, then you aren't, if you'll forgive the irony here, human. You aren't worth the rights that were granted to you. And another disturbing thought, Satie's influence and her ability to raise fear and alarm in the people was far-reaching. She was so influential that the head of Starfleet security arrived. I've stated it already, but what I love about this episode is I honestly don't believe that anyone here is meaning to do ill, that they want to hurt someone. I think they're trying to do what they think is best. And Picard shows how good intentions can really hurt a society. Right now, the script sits at over 2,000 words and 4 pages, well above the normal breakdowns that I do. And even now, I'll be honest, I feel like I've barely touched this episode. I'm tempted to go even further and break down the specific interactions, especially with the court proceedings, but I'm not going to. Not for this video, at least. Let me know if you guys want me to do that, and I may have an actual series just dedicated to this episode. It depends on what you guys want to see. Everything I've discussed about this is alarming and dangerous, but what's even more catastrophic is perhaps Picard's speech towards the end. Picard discusses how Satie has been exposed, but that doesn't matter. There will always be a Satie out there. They will utilize hate and fear to push an agenda and divide people. Let me know your thoughts on all this in this video. This video may have been a waste of my time, but tell me what you think in the comments below.